The Gupta emails have got the whole country talking. They've got the whole country chattering. And the Gupta emails are the equivalent of what I'm told an enema does. Once inserted, you never know what's going to come out. And it's a glorious time in South Africa to be in media. It's a glorious time to be a journalist. But also, media is taking considerable pressure, financially, politically, and of course, socially as well. So, to talk about business, to talk about business's role in the media, and the way in which business should have a bigger and louder and more powerful voice after years of behaving like Cyril Ramaphosa did until about 3 months ago. Ladies and gentlemen, please will you welcome our panel. Up first this morning, we've got Sipho Pichana. He's the chair of Anglo Gold Ashanti, but also the head of the Save South Africa campaign. Sipho Pichana, please come up. Grab a seat. Wendy Applebaum is a philanthropist. She is a businesswoman, and her husband makes some of the world's greatest Chenin Blanc. What a guy's got to do to get a case delivered to his house, I don't know. Mike Abel, the managing director of MNC Saatchi Abel. Welcome to you, Mike Abel. You are welcome. And Siri Charalambos, and Silly is the publisher of the Daily Maverick and wears short trousers. Nice to meet you, Silly. First up, what we're going to do is I'm going to invite Sipho Pichana just to address us 10, 12 minutes or so, and then we will embark on Q&A. If you want to ask them questions, and I would like me to facilitate those questions, please tweet me. You've all got phones. I can see the lights. And just tweet at Bruce Business, and I will do my best to get to your questions in the next hour or so. But first, Sipho Pichana.
Do you mind if I do that?
Please, you do it wherever you like.
Well, good morning, everybody. My dear friends, the fellow woke South Africans, and everybody here present. It indeed warms my heart to see so many of you here today to learn and to speak and participate in the defense of our freedom and democracy. I believe it is appropriate to begin today by acknowledging some of the real heroes of our struggle against state capture. The whistleblowers responsible for finding the Gupta emails, and the brave journalists who have trawled through them all to expose the scandal, one scandal after another. And I'm sure you'd agree with me that we would not be aware of what is going on unless they did all this work. They, in my view, are the real heroes, our patriots, and we salute them. And I would like you to join me in acknowledging their role and giving them a standing ovation and applauding them. Thank you very much. We need to say this, and we need to say it loud today. Like the evils of apartheid that were exposed by the World-run Daily Mail and the Sunday Post in the 1970s and the 1980s, the evil that journalists are exposing now is abhorrent and a threat to the very survival of our country and the humanity of our citizens. In both cases, our citizens, our journalists, have exposed the criminals that are conspiring to dehumanize millions of our people. Back then, under apartheid, it was for an evil and corrupt ideology, while today, it is a cabal of thieves and looters who are pillaging our public purse. Journalists and whistleblowers are shining a light on a band of criminals who are diverting billions of rands that could be used to feed, to educate, and to uplift our people, and moving it to Dubai. Thanks for your tireless efforts. These facts are no longer in dispute. As whistleblowers and journalists, you are playing as important a role as that of Percy Kobozas, the agri-clusters, the Sophie Temers, the monopadelas, who expose the twin fists of oppression and repression, often risking their lives and their personal freedoms. In remembering our proud tradition of fearless journalists, we will in future talk about the Manchanchas and Quintals, the Souls and Sekitis, the Paytons and Poplaks. We will remember are Munsamis and Pasons, and times the Brahmas and the Jikas. The list goes on and on and on. Without you, we would not have insight into the sheer scale of the state capture networks and the extent to which the Guptas and others, under the guiding hand of the godfather of state capture, his not so excellent Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma, have captured our country in partnership with the corporate robbers. But one story still remains to be told when it comes to the Gupta emails, and I hope to read it soon. It's the story of who is funding BLF. Currently, one of the most poisonous threats to freedom of expression and to our democracy. The recent actions of these brown-shirt thugs, such as the attacks on Peter Bruce and their violent disruption of last week's Amapongane event, show how desperate state capture project has become and how close we are to the apartheid era days of jackboot culture, repression, and kragdadigheid. We should all be worried about the emergence of the BLF. It is one of the ugly stepchildren of the Guptas and their Bell Pottinger project. Along with ANN7, the New Age, the fake news tweet bots, the white monopoly capital websites, and so-called decolonization foundation. Driven purely by money, these forces abuse and disrespect our freedoms and democracy, and will literally do anything, absolutely anything, to get a few more rupees in their bank accounts. They disregard our courts. They act as if they are untouchable. They behave as if they have the blessing of the Minister of Police and his lieutenants. Wouldn't it be wonderful if that could be dismissed as a ridiculous notion? Together, we must stop the anti-democracy forces in their tracks. We must do everything we can, using the law and the Constitution as our shield, to defend our democracy against these mercenaries, these dogs of war, who are threatening the lives of journalists and others. And just a quick question that I would like to pose. As someone who's not a journalist, why do you continue to give BLF oxygen on your media platforms? Surely, it is time to consider a boycott of their press conferences and events, and to no longer grant them interviews, as Barnum Tomboti and others have suggested. But it is not just journalists who should be concerned about the rise of BLF thuggery, the Gupta propaganda channels, and the explosion of fake news. Business should be equally worried, as it sees that other Gupta tentacles tighten their grip on our economy. So too should the faith-based community, professional bodies, our youth, and broader civil society. Because today, it is journalists who are under attack. And I promise you, tomorrow, it will certainly be you. And if there isn't a vibrant, probing media to investigate and to report on the lawless activities of the Guptas, various units, and their co-conspirators in government, and some parts of the private sector, you will increasingly be vulnerable. Just ask the staff at APSA, who have to hide behind their desks when the BLF arrives to make demands about the Reserve Bank. These thugs have developed a method of intimidation that they will look to replicate across society, to silence anyone who speaks out against their masters. We must stand together to ensure that they do not succeed. On top of that, we should all be worried about the increasing evidence of a global financial conspiracy that is being exposed by the Daily Maverick in particular. It involves fellow criminals in Russia, Asia, the Middle East, and other parts of Africa. We should not underestimate the lengths to which it is prepared to go to ensure it keeps on looting. Here at home, business cannot avoid what is happening to our own country before our own eyes. Although we have probably only seen the tip of the state capture iceberg, we have already seen the extent to which state-owned companies and corporate South Africa are complicit in corruption. SAP is implicated, McKinsey is implicated, Eskom, SAA, Prasa, Transnet are totally immersed in it all. Business must take a stand on this and speak out. It has a responsibility to increase its involvement, to raise its voice, to use its influence for good. It must enforce integrity within its own community and show that these are rotten apples, as we hope they are, and that they are not representative of business as a whole. Organized business must isolate those complicit in state capture and help resource legal action against them. They must be made an example of. Business must encourage its members to cooperate with international law enforcement agencies who are increasingly interested in the Gupta's money laundering activities if they have any evidence or knowledge of wrongdoing. It must actively support legislation around transparency in political party funding so that we break the axis of evil that exists between some business and some political parties. And perhaps most importantly, business should help fund quality investigative journalism and provide expertise in areas such as forensic audits, legal strategies, and effective prosecutions. Journalists are the people holding the line against a total overrun of our state and our democracy, and they must have our full and total support. Let me put this bluntly. Business must do whatever it can to ensure that we get to the bottom of state capture, to expose it and root it out, for once and for all. And it must do so now. Ultimately, this is about getting on the right side of history. In my view, no one who cares about South Africa can afford to ignore what is going on at the moment. It is well and truly time to get off the fence and decide which side of history you want to be on. Ladies and gentlemen, each of us is being called upon to take a stand. The media is under threat, the judiciary is under threat. We have an NPA that doesn't prosecute and a public protector who is not worthy of that title. Our proud state-owned companies have been hollowed out. SARS is a shell of the efficient machine it used to be. And Zuma's nuclear deal that he continues to push could suck what is left out of the national fiscus. We have to stand and fight for our freedom to speak, write, organize, march, and protest. And we have to do it until we have rolled back the advances of state capture, taken back control of the state, and reclaimed our country for our children and for our grandchildren. Let me conclude. As you are probably aware, civil society formed a new broad front this week to intensify the fight against state capture and to ensure we reclaim our country from the crooks and looters. The new front, called Future South Africa, provides an opportunity for business, media, faith-based groups, and other organizations to get on the right side of history and to ensure that we stop state capture in its tracks. It is a non-partisan, non-aligned movement to galvanize the defenders of democracy and to ensure we pack even more of a punch in taking on the crooks and thieves. Our immediate priority, of course, is a vote of no confidence in Zuma on 8th August, where we are calling on all MPs to vote this corrupt tyrant out of office. We are encouraged by the ANC members of parliament such as Mondli Gungubele, Makosi Khoza, Pravin Gordhan, Derek Hanekom, and trust that they will get support from other ANC members of parliament who realize that this is a country game and not a party game. We are calling for a national shutdown on the 8th of August to show South Africa's revulsion and call on business to support this initiative, as well as the other sectors of society, such as trade unions and faith-based groups. Beyond that, we are campaigning to recapture critical state institutions, restore credible leadership in all the key departments and state-owned corporations, and to reclaim our country. And we need all hands on deck to do so. We cannot waste any more time. We have to act, and act now to save South Africa, and to ensure that this is a future South Africa we can all be proud to live in. Thank you very much.
Sipho Pichana, everybody. I just want to clarify something. When you said all hands on deck, you weren't referring to the Titanic, I hope.
Well, I was referring to the urgency of the moment and the need for all of us to do whatever we can in whatever way we think it's appropriate to make our voices heard about our disapproval of being led by somebody who has no regard for the constitution of our country, for the values of our nation, and who is basically sold out our country and undermined the sovereignty of our nation.
Wendy Applebaum, 2 years ago, there were plans for a big anti-corruption march, and we had a discussion similar to this one with a bunch of clever people on the radio, and we were talking about Mark Haywood was very grumpy, and he was saying big business isn't getting on board, big business isn't participating, big business isn't giving people time off work to go on the march. And the march, let's be fair about it, was a bit of a flop. And I remember you saying to Mark Haywood there right now, you understand why big business isn't supporting his anti-corruption march, because the punitive nature of the state forbids them from doing it. However, since then, things seem to have changed quite dramatically.
Well, I think, it is a very punitive state. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, there are consequences for everybody. So now that I'm semi-retired and a wine farmer, perhaps everyone's going to say I'm not part of big business anymore, I'm part of the big mouth though. So I'm very, very happy to stand up and say those things. But I really do believe that if business gets together as a team, as you say, and work together, they become much stronger as a whole. And I think that people are stepping up to the plate now. I really do. There are noises that are going on. And Sipho is really a hero. It's an absolute honor to sit on a panel with him. Because I think that you are flying the flag. Thank you. And you've been leading this in a fearless way. And I think that we all need to become a lot more fearless. We need to stand up and speak truth to power. I tell you what, if business does not do that, they will have nothing left to talk about, irrespective. Because this place is standing on the edge of the precipice, and all business will actually fade into insignificance.
Mike Abel, I mean, fear is a great motivator, the fear of loss. If business didn't have the fear of loss, and that, to my mind, is the great motivator, hold on a second to use the Titanic analogy, we're sitting in first class, but the water level is rising. Oh my goodness me, we better start bailing out the ship. Have they left it too late?
It's a very interesting thing because I was wondering until Nenegate where big business was. Because, it's not like when we inherited Jacob Zuma as our president, that a man didn't come in with over 700 counts of corruption against him. So we knew what we were in for from the very start. But because people operate, I guess, out of enlightened self-interest, nobody did anything. And then, there's that great saying about how do you boil a frog? You turn the heat up so imperceptibly that by the time it's boiling, you don't realize it. But I think that what Nenegate did was it raised the temperature by 50 degrees all of a sudden. And all of a sudden, big business stood up and kind of took note. Where we are today, and as Sipho and Wendy have said, is it's not a matter of choice anymore, Bruce, it's a matter of conscience.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not going to buy a matter of conscience. I'm going to buy a matter of necessity. Big business really has a conscience about this. If it had a conscience, it would have spoken up 8 years ago. Now, the water levels are rising, and it's in panic mode. Come on, let's be honest about it.
Well, I agree and I disagree, because I think that a lot of stuff has been viewed as sensationalism, as fake news. I think that business has certainly had a sense that things are semi-rotten. But I think just even, I mean, we were kind of at our lowest depth until Guptagate broke and Gupta leaks. And then you think, my God, it's so much greater than even the worst that we anticipated. But let's jump back to 2013 and have a look at big business there. So Sizwe and Klesana did that wonderful ad on Michael Jordan for FNB, those children that didn't believe that they had a future.
Yes.
And that thing was also, they developed content around children speaking out on YouTube. And then, as you know, they got a call from Latuli House.
Yes.
And Gwedi summoned them. And like naughty school children, they went there. Now, big business, before you run an ad like that, you have to look at every variable. You have to understand what you're going to do. The last thing that you do is apologize, because you know you're going to get into trouble. And what they did was, unfortunately, apologize. What they should have done is said, we'll meet you and we'll raise you. But obviously what Latuli House pointed out was exactly how much government business they had. So all businesses are in that position right now. I mean, for South Africa to survive, as Wendy said, we're beyond that point. It's not about looking at which account you can win or lose or how much government business, because there won't be anything left.
In the same way is if everybody refuses to do business on the same sorts of terms in a non-collusive fashion, government will have no choice but to do business with business.
That's right, 100%
under those
right.
sorts of circumstances.
Exactly.
But you raised that issue of the advert, but wasn't the first time that FNB got itself into trouble. Probably 12 years ago, they were going to run a campaign about crime, and Thabo Mbeki put his foot down. And Thabo Mbeki was speaking about the perceptions of crime. And there was a meeting in a boardroom, I am told this is true, where the ANC heavies came into the room, sat around the table and said, we're not going to say we're going to audit you individually until your eyes bleed. We're not going to say that because we're not those kind of guys. But you really want to run this campaign? And it's that sort of leverage which gets big business to go, we're squeaky clean, of course. But who needs the inconvenience of the audits? And that is the power of the state. But by standing together, is your point, business has a far stronger voice.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
And
and
if it
not on a hashtag basis.
No.
So there's this very nice hashtag CO pledge and all of these things. It's really when the rubber hits the road, what are you actually going to do? I mean, you look at a guy like Wayne Duvenage, who left being the CEO of Avis to go and start Alta, primarily at the beginning to fight toll roads, which I think he did very effectively, and now all of these cases of corruption that are opened against Minister Zwane and the like and are growing. I think that's where business actually, and where our voices in this room are most powerful, is when we actually take that outrage beyond social media into meaningful stuff. You know, people talk about tax, not paying their company taxes. I mean, very brave people. I certainly wouldn't put my hand up and do that. And a lot of people say, well, why should you pay tax if what's going on in the country? Or whether Madiba is your president or whether you've got Jacob Zuma, you pay tax. It's really the fight happens after you've paid tax, what you do with it as opposed to that. So I think we all have to make very, very tough decisions about what we're actually going to do versus say.
Sure. I mean, Sidi Charalambos, is there a risk of fatigue? I mean, already, you know, you open up the newspaper and it's the latest in the emails, and you go, okay, yep, I think you know that, and skip over to sport or wherever you get your titillation in the newspapers nowadays. Is there a risk of fatigue? And if there is a risk of fatigue, the importance to move really quickly is imperative.
Yeah, there is a risk of fatigue. I think you try and combat that in a couple of ways. One, you try and make your journalism readable and entertaining, and bring a style and a flavor to what you're doing. But then also there's a question of documenting history almost, and being a starting point for hopefully something like a commission of inquiry that maybe one day will be established. So it's almost looking past that and kind of looking at the bigger picture and making sure that it's documented, that we've done our job. And the size of these leaks are just so massive that we'll be busy for a long time still. And it's not, it might not be in the short-term interest to carry on because of the fatigue, but it needs to be done and has to be done, and we'll do it in the best way that we can.
There's so much evidence, even anecdotal evidence or prima facie evidence, call it what you like, of malfeasance on behalf of some corporates and of large swathes of the public sector. We are told that there is a unit being put together to start investigating this notion, this perception of state capture, if you like. Without a capable and able and a willing state, what is the point?
Well,
Of
first
all
of
of
all,
this.
I'd like to say that I've been very, very encouraged in the recent period by a shift in business leadership. Business, in a way that somewhat unprecedented, went and met with the president and told him in no uncertain terms that what is going on around state capture, his role in it, and the role of the Minister of Finance, and all of this and all of that is totally unacceptable, and it doesn't work, it doesn't serve the country. And not so long ago, you would never have had business have that kind of very head-on conversation with government. And they made that statement public. So clearly there is a big shift in business in an organized fashion to take on the state capture thing within the limitations of what you can do as a business formation. And I think that the best way to actually engage is through organized business structures like your Business Leadership South Africa, Business Unity South Africa, etc., etc. Now, in respect of taking action and holding people accountable, that's where the rubber hits the road. There are people who've been involved in criminal activity here, and the law enforcement agencies have done nothing about it. Because one of the first things, many people will not remember this, but one of the first acts that President Zuma took when he came into office was try and extend the term of office of the Chief Justice. And it was a move to try and undermine the independence of the judiciary. Civil society took him to court, and he didn't succeed in doing that. And he has been systematically trying to undermine law enforcement agencies, the police, the Hawks, and the intelligence services, etc., etc. And unless you fix those, you actually are not going to have proper prosecution of people that are involved in these kinds of activities. And that's why civil society is stepping in and taking action against certain individuals who obviously should be charged. It costs quite a lot, and the work that is being done by the media around exposing this throws up a whole range of evidence that is being used to actually make those prosecutions possible.
Is this of any value in a society, Wendy Applebaum, where there seems to be no shame?
You know, I think, talking to Stilly's point about, whether or not this is media fatigue or whatever the case may be, this is actually history, which will come back to haunt anybody in times to come. And I mean, here we've got the Timor investigation 45 years later at the moment, where people are still being shamed. But this anybody who doesn't stand up and be counted now, it is difficult. You can't ask turkeys to vote for Christmas. It just doesn't come naturally. And I think that so many people in government have become so corrupted and allowed themselves to be sucked in that, in fact, they have no choice, but they all need to go.
Yeah.
So you have institutions, as we were talking about. I loved the cartoon last week. Where's Sean? It's just mind-boggling that people are not standing up in the wake of such unbelievable evidence. So I think we should not stop that push, because we really do need to put pressure on people to come clean.
I was Jabu Mabuza the other day, and he is leading the business charge, if you like. And he said after Pravin Gordhan got fired on the 31st of March, big business went into a sulk. Because they had a working relationship, at least with somebody within government, somebody with whom they could do business. And suddenly he got fired, and we saw Mcebisi Jonas getting fired as well. And suddenly all bets were off. But the decision was taken to continue engaging at a level. And it's not comfortable. It's not easy. So there's a balance, Mike Abel, between being a ferocious critic, but being an active participant as well. It's a kind of a schizophrenic arrangement that business has got to have now with government to say, we want to hold you accountable, but how can we help you? How can we aid the process of reconstructing a battered state? I mean, that's the difficulty, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think that South Africa took a collective sigh of relief when big business got involved around the firing of Nene, the weekend special Des Van Rooyen, and then fortunately Praveen. And that was engaging the enemy, saying, we know what you're up to over here, but perhaps if you just listen to a bit of reason, we can get to a point. I think we see a little bit of that with Malusi Gigaba at the moment, where he understands that he has to engage with business, whether he wants to engage with business or, who's kind of directing his agenda. I think the room knows well enough. But from his point of view and from business's point of view, you do see that level of engagement. And, in all areas of hostility and warfare, business or not, part of seeking a solution is active engagement of the enemy and trying to find the good guys there. And there are many good guys within the ANC. It's really about finding them and leading them. And, and thank God we've got people like Sipho who are ANC blue blood who will step out of that thing and give the other people the courage and the voice to stand up and join that movement. But there's no choice but to engage.
Are your staff coming to work on Tuesday the 8th? Are you giving them the day off, Mike Abel?
Well, whenever there is a march, I don't tell them that they need to take off, but I give them the choice to take off. Because there are a lot of people that might be staunch ANC supporters on the team, where I would be violating their own choice by saying you have to go and march. So the message to my people each time there's a march, and they know how outspoken I am, they're very welcome to go there. I encourage them to go, but I understand if they don't want to either.
The staff at De Morgan's on. There are no grapes to pick, there's no wine to press. I think the season is over.
The good news is we're a long way from Cape Town.
But the point is, I mean, if your staff wanted the day off, could they take the day off?
They can have it.
And the 45,000, 50,000 workers at Anglo Gold Ashanti, Sipho Puchan?
Well, they are free to join the march, and certainly in the same way as Mike would recognize that society is divided over this issue. Those that support it are free to do so. We respect the rights of those that take a different view.
Siri Chalambusa, I take it you're not giving your staff off
No, absolutely not.
on Tuesday. I mean, I think that's a fairly reasonable...
It's a full-out working day for us.
It's a full-out working day. That's very unpatriotic of you, I must tell you that much.
Bruce, there is one
Bruce,
point
they're
I
a
would-
business. They need to make a living.
But that's always been the excuse. Let's get on to that in a moment. Sorry, Silly.
There is one point I'd like to make. We automatically assume that having a voice is bad for business. But I think if we just look at our sponsors, they've actually built an entire brand. Well, the brand was built by a lot of other stuff as well. But a lot of their marketing was linked to having a voice. And they showed that it can be good for business to have a voice, especially if you do it in the right way, tongue-in-cheek. Yes, you don't need a license to sell chicken, a government-issued license to sell chicken, but it can be good for business. And we've seen other examples where this vacuum has created an opportunity for people who are starting to become outspoken to be able to gain a little bit of traction, a little bit of recognition for having a voice. And people are starting to respect that. And it's starting to become good for business. It can be.
What about this notion of, hold on a second, but we have responsibilities, we have taxes to pay, we have there's kids to put it through school, we have to do the business of doing business, Wendy Applebaum. We cannot be getting ourselves involved in politics. We pay onerous levels of tax in South Africa. We do our bit, the state must do its bit. For
Yeah,
a
but
long
that-
time, business has held that view.
You've got responsible and irresponsible companies. You've got good guys and bad guys. And business has got as many bad guys as it has good, and probably more. I think that there is a profit motive. There's definitely is. Shareholders are breathing down your necks. But I really do believe that South African companies are probably one of the highest taxed companies in the world. Not by the virtue of the actual tax bracket, but the add-ons, the BEEs, the social investment, etc. And I think that there are a lot of very, very responsible companies. Obviously, there's some dreadful ones, some of which I've taken on in the past. But you ask yourself, I mean, I've been, in fact, just to go back a little bit, Vodacom actually stuck their fingers in my till and didn't think there was anything wrong with taking money out of my account, a measly amount, I have to say, but it aggravated
But it's
me
yours.
nonetheless. But once I started looking at the company and looking at how absolutely disgusting the telecoms are, in the fact that
But, okay, so they're willing to do that to you. How can we expect them to stand up for the country?
they are disgusting. Let me tell you something. What they charge the poor in this country and send to Vodafone in the UK, huge, great, big wallops of our budget.
I wonder if
They
Vodafone in
wouldn't
the UK
dare
uses
get
Bell
away
Pottinger,
with
but
taking
yeah.
the advantage of the poor in England the way they take advantage of the poor here. Why do the poor pay considerably, and I mean considerably more, sometimes 400% more than those of us who can afford it? Because they have to buy small bundles of data which get eaten up and stolen, and they expire at the end of the day or the month. This is utterly disgusting. I think the poor have an absolute necessary right to information, and that is one of the new modes of information. I think it's criminal. Criminal. Now, do we teach them? How does one teach them? Surely their own conscience actually must come to the party. Data must fall is an argument that's been going on and on and on. But are they waiting for the law to tell them what the right thing to do is? I don't get it.
Yeah.
And is the law holding back? Because
I don't-
the
it's not-
telcos have a huge amount
Listen,
of
part of it
power.
is the law, part of it is that government, through the PIC, invests hugely in some of these companies. And secondly, I think there are a hell of a lot of people on the take, because if you look at the size of government contracts in terms of data and cell phone, it's enormous. And so is the ANC. Now we have companies, the South African companies, basically like Telkom, who charge about 29 cents a gig rather than 150 to 2 rand a gig from the others. But who does the government support? The poor supports.
That's why it's good. That's why
shareholders
data's got to
who
be
don't
so
even live here.
expensive, because the kickbacks have got to be paid, Wendy. You've got
Exactly.
You've got to understand how this
Excellent. I
works.
agree.
But we've got it in Stutterfords, for example, in the news late yesterday afternoon. The Competition Commission says Stutterfords is accused of 659 counts of collusion. Who were their biggest clients? But the Presidency, Parliament, the Department of Justice, the police, the intelligence services. Now, when you're prepared to steal from those guys, if they are guilty, I mean, there are no limits, are there? There is no shame in,
You know
in
what?
South Africa.
Society rots from the head, just like a fish. And I think that everybody, it's a free-for-all at the moment, and everybody's just making hay while the sun rises, because sure as God, it's about to set.
Yeah, but that's the point, isn't it? There's this mining town mentality that has beset Joburg since 1885. This sense we've got to make money really quickly so that we can get out and go and take our ill-gotten gains elsewhere. I mean, and it feels like we're in that kind of feeding frenzy right now. Mike?
Yeah, I think that there's a huge difference in business between can and should. And a lot of people, you can behave in a certain way, but whether you should behave that way is a separate matter altogether. And businesses are inanimate objects, ultimately. So it's really the boards and the people who run those companies that will determine the soul and the fabric of that company. I believe that a lot of these decisions that are being made are made in your formative years, or made in your childhood, your values, what your parents have handed down, where you actually then get to the helm of a company and you look at something like it and you say, well, we might be able to get away with these practices, ripping the poor off, charging for data, it expiring, whatever those things. In fact, the same company just recently spent 4 million rand on Gupta Media, by the way. And so let's have a
That's
look
what
at
we
that.
can do.
And Outsurance also spent 1 million rand recently on them. And you kind of think, well, why would you do that? Yeah, exactly. I mean, you sit on the plane and they give you an option of which paper to take, and you offered the Business Day or you offered the New Age, and kind of I think the air hostesses are terrified of me now, because I say, like,
Do you not have a newspaper?
no, absolutely right. Take that government propaganda away. But it's the people that support that kind of stuff that enable it. And so if you are going to have a value system, then you have to shut down those bad practices that are happening in your company.
Siri, something that Sipho Pichana said in his talk was that big business needs to get behind media. Big business needs to support media. It needs to support media financially. It needs to support media with skills to help with things like forensic audits. how comfortable are you in, to use a South African term, the capturing of media in that sort of way? You want your ferocious independence. You're happy for him to buy advertising. Are you happy for him to fund directly the investigative power of media?
I think each...
It's a subtle difference.
Yeah, there is a subtle difference, and it is a challenging question as to where you draw the line for that support. But right now, there's very little, so anything more than that would be great. I mean, just looking at this conference, for example, to find a sponsor that doesn't chicken out is...
Very good, still.
I'm sure he's been practicing that for weeks. Yeah. I'm going to find a moment, and then I'm going to... Mike, did you write the line?
John Business, watch out. Yeah, it's difficult. You know, for years we've been plying along, producing this quality product day in and day out, and only to get that, love your product, love what you guys do, but sorry, you're just too political. You know, we're not asking business to become activists overnight. We're not asking them to become the front line of civil society, but we are asking them to do something. Do something, and it doesn't need to be a massive amount. We run very lean. You know, we joke that a cornerstone of our democracy is run by a couple of people with 3G modems and a couple of laptops, and that should scare a lot of us. So a little will go a very long way. But we really have to realize that we can no longer use that excuse, oh, sorry, it's too political. In case we haven't noticed, this is South Africa, and the world is entirely political as well. So those excuses just don't carry water anymore. And there are a number of ways. They don't need to be direct. You don't need to have a direct line between a corporate sponsor and an investigative unit. We could build intermediate entities that could aggregate contributions and then disseminate to multiple
There's a model
beneficiaries.
that's been used from a place in Saxonwold that's operated in a very similar way. They take lots of money, give it to intermediaries, and then do their good work.
Yeah.
It's a slippery slope, Stilly.
It is. Absolutely.
And how do you balance it then? How do you get the desired outcome, which is transparency, which is media freedom, without interference, yet get a blank check in order to do the work? Sipho?
And that's important. I mean, the operative word there is transparency. It's the same principle as funding political parties as a business. Do it transparently and do it without any expectation of material gain arising from that.
Does AngloGold
As a matter of principle,
sorry I really want to hit strike while the iron is hot here. Does AngloGold Ashanti fund political parties?
we do.
And in proportion to their size, or how do you do it?
We do it in proportion to their representation in Parliament. We announce how we came to that and who is being funded.
Isn't it time to stop that?
And we actually didn't do it around the last elections.
Okay.
Because we had a debate about the efficacy of doing so. But in principle, we have a policy as a company where we think that it is appropriate for corporates to support political parties as part of support for democracy.
Should corporates be doing it on the basis of allegiance, or should they be copping out and doing it proportionally? Because that is a cop-out. If business truly wants to make a statement about its political intentions, then it needs to say, you know what, we've got a budget of 10 million rand, we're going to give 5 million to the EFF, we're going to give 2 million to Bantu Holomisa, and we're going to give the rest to the Greens or whoever else they might choose to give their money to.
Well, you know, I have a lot of disagreement with a lot of political parties in terms of what they represent. But if you do this in support of a democratic project, part of democracy is having diversity of views and all of that. So if you just do it just in support of a political party that you agree with in terms of its policies and all of that, I think it seems to me to be quite subjective. And also, there are other people in the company who may be supporting.
But that's the difficult thing. But how do you do it?
So you do it on the basis of party representation in Parliament, the strength of their following and support. Even then, we don't support everybody.
But isn't that tacit support then for a party that you oppose? If you continue to fund the ANC with cash as the chairman of the company, yet you then stand up on public podiums and beat them down. There seems to be a contradiction.
There would be. Certainly, that would be a major point of discussion in the coming elections. I can't imagine that the board of Anglo Gold Ashanti would be comfortable doing that. So there will be a big debate, but there will be discussion anyway about that. But I just wanted to come back to this point about about taxes and business speaking out. You know, part of our social responsibility program, we build schools in the Eastern Cape rural areas, replacing mud schools. It costs us a third of what it costs government to build a school. And when we finish building a school, we have these ceremonies where government ministers come and to cut a ribbon and so on. And one of the things that they don't like you talking about is how much it costs us to build a school compared to what it costs them to build a school. Because they get embarrassed about that. But I think that it's important that we should raise those things with government. We should raise them with corporates. One of the things is that, no, it costs more for us to do this because we have to do this black empowerment thing. I must tell you, I would have huge discomfort with the idea that it must cost the state more to build a public facility like a school or a clinic and something like that in order to facilitate a black empowerment company participating. That's stealing from the poor and giving to
the increasingly rich,
to a small elite people. So it's a very problematic thing. So this conversation, I think, is going to have to move to that kind of realm.
How do we do this better? I suppose, let's wrap up with that. Business has been silent, business has been about vested interests, business has been happy to leave politics up to politicians until Nenegeddon on the 9th of the 12th, 2015, where the wheels came off and then Pravin Gordhan managed to placate everybody. And then we had the big sulk of the 31st of March when he got fired. And we're in this phase now of the Gupta leaks and lots of information, the deluge of information that is coming out. And there's tons of evidence, there's tons of information. But business, and there are people in this room with a lot of money behind them, what is the one thing that you would have those with the capacity to do it to do? I'm going to come to you last, Sipho Pitjana. Stilly, I'll start with you.
Well, I've got a laundry list of things that they can help with. They can come see me after this, after this
Okay,
meeting.
not particularly personal vested interest, but more broadly, perhaps.
The simplest way is to actually just support the media as an institution through advertising. That's the first and easiest way, most transparent and.
Now, Tim Cohen at Business Day is appealing to Nikki Newton-King not to remove the last remnants of compulsory company advertising from Business Day. In the olden days, they had the tombstones and they had, of course, the big results advertising, which was compulsory. That was removed during Peter Bruce's time, and Business Day got a bit thinner. And as a result of that, Tim Cohen is now looking at this and saying, sorry, Nikki Newton-King, but you have to keep companies advertising. Is it really, and the companies will be saying, but we can put this stuff on the internet. From a transparency point of view, it's not important that we advertise in Business Day. Why should we? And it comes down to the importance of saying, how much of a free media do you as business want or not, as the case might be?
That's true. There's also the other side of the coin is that not all media houses and traditional legacy ones that have print, for example, have a lot more overheads. They cost a lot more to run than, let's say, a digital operation. And that's why I come back to the case of, a little will go a long way. Let's reverse the cycle. Let's start something. We operate in the digital space where 90% of all new advertising that gets spent goes to Google and Facebook. I don't see Google and Facebook fighting for your democracy at the moment.
Well, they'll vomit anything onto the internet, or allow anything to be vomited onto the internet in the world of fake news. And that is, it's about protecting, then, media as an institution.
It starts with that.
Yeah.
It starts with supporting it as an institution. How you do that, how you you allocate that spend, I guess, well, that's, that's up to each.
And you
that's
don't
up
have to
each
like what
spender.
the media outlet says about you, as long as they're saying bad things about everybody else too. I take it steady.
Yeah.
Mike Abel?
I think that it's very important to first appreciate the massive role that independent media has played in educating.
When you say independent media, could you just clarify that, please?
Certainly not the
independently
independent
minded
media
media.
group, exactly
Right,
right.
okay.
Not our illustrious Mr. Survey, who chose not to arrive today. So where would we be without the Daily Mavericks of this, or Nama Buganis and the
We
guys
have a
that
lot
have
more
brought?
time in our day to actually do some work.
That is also
For
true.
one.
To work in dumb blindness. And I think that these guys have played an unbelievable role. But, still he talks about the importance of advertising revenue, and I have a slightly different view around it. And that is that advertising revenue, people pay more for advertising based on the number of eyeballs that see the ad. So it's based on big audiences. In order to get big audiences, you need to be controversial. You need clickbait. You need to say stuff that people want to know more about. You won't believe what happened today. Oh, well, let me go and see what happened today. And so it takes away from journalism. And it takes away, I believe, from a balanced and fair story. I think that we need to move much more into the space of subscriptions. Because with subscriptions, you have much more quality audience, you have much more investigative journalism, you have much more balanced and better stories. And I think that people are looking to these publications for exactly that. So people say, oh, I love the Daily Maverick, they're unbelievable.
Well, how much would you
do
pay?
you subscribe?
How much would you pay to be part of a community that supports it? I mean, if you look at The Guardian, for example, the Guardian newspaper in the UK, the bottom of every story is, please give us some money. You turn them, you do this and say, well, no, I like it free. Yeah,
Well, I
that's the
think
risk.
that New York Times do it quite well, where you get a piece of the story, or FT, and then you have to be a
Saves.
subscriber to read further. And I
And
think
if it's
that's
any good, it's going to draw you in and make you pay for it.
absolutely right. And New York Times have turned it around from an advertising-based revenue model to one of subscription. Obviously, it's not the heady days of when they used to get the same revenues when you track where New York Times was then to where they are today. But if you look at iTunes, you look at Spotify, you look at Netflix, you look at HBO, people are prepared to pay for quality content. And so we should never sacrifice quality content, because that's the very thing that defends what we pick up. And knowledge is power, and we need proper knowledge. So big business, not big business, all business has to support these guys, because otherwise
How
we
do you
wouldn't
direct
know.
your clients' advertising budgets into the future then? How do you advise the way in which those advertising budgets are apportioned? In the same way as a large company might do it with political parties?
Yeah.
Or do you do it with a conscience?
Well, we wouldn't direct any of our clients directly, indirectly, or otherwise to what we would consider to being propaganda machines. We do have
Thank
that
you, Donald Rumsfeld.
We
Yes.
do, but and we do have that conversation. Ultimately, we are not the arbiter of where they spend their money. We can guide, we can advise, and ultimately it's their money and they'll choose where to place it. But you're going to be guided by target audiences. Where are you going to reach the market that they're looking to attract? And
Would you fire a client that insisted in advertising in the new age?
sorry?
Would you fire a client that insisted on advertising? We got this strategy, we're going for ANN7 and the new age. Because the client is mad and they need to be taught a lesson.
Well, other than our new public protector, I don't know many people that have swapped one channel to turn on ANN7 as the preferred viewing channel. Look, I would question their motives. So they're probably, knowing myself, being a bit of a Don Quixote and sometimes shooting myself in the foot. I would want to know the motives behind putting it behind Gupta Media, absolutely.
No,
And-
Transnet, you can't keep doing that, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, got you.
absolutely. I mean, if it was a portion of their money, and I would still want to know what the reason was, because we could find those audiences, in my view, through legitimate channels.
There we go. Legitimate. Excellent. Good choice of words. Wendy Applebaum.
Well,
Last thoughts.
Listen, I sometimes find myself so conflicted. I refuse to get on South African Airways because they serve the new age as your reading material. But since we bailed them out, there's this terrible conflict of whether we should support them, even if they do support the new age. And listen, I mean, short of covering each other's tracks, Obviously, I think one must vote with one's advertising budget, but I think that business can do more than that. I really do believe that I think that they need to assist the media in delivering these messages and stories that have real gravitas and importance and are not full of shit.
Explain, assist.
So what I think we need to do is have a litigation fund, as you say, have an investigative fund that can assist those stories in having that gravitas, so that you can separate the wheat from the chaff. And I think that we need to fund the Chapter 9 institutions. I mean, the Public Protector was such a magnificent example of a good Chapter 9 institution. And within months, this woman who doesn't even know what her day job is, has no idea what her powers are, is running around trying to have an effect on the Reserve Bank. The mind boggles. Honestly, it really does boggle. However, there are some good ones. The Human Rights Commission, there are all sorts of Chapter 9 that could really add to the validity of the stories, and I think that business should really come in and do some of that.
Final word to you, Sipho Pitjana.
Well, for a very good reason, a maverick in government, and this is no comment on Daily Maverick, but a maverick in government called Jimmy Manyi somewhat decided that he was taking advertising spend away from wider media to spend on the Guptas. What does that say to business in terms of if we believe that the freedom of the media and independence of the media is so critical? It does suggest that we should actually pay attention to that. We should provide support to ensure that media plays the kind of vibrant role that is so central to our democracy. I mean, I tell everybody when I travel internationally that the saving grace for South Africa is the fact that it's a constitutional democracy, and secondly, that we have a very vibrant, independent media that is able to go into issues, raise debates, expose things that are going on, both in the private and the public sector. And that's the point about private sector, is that we shouldn't be supporting the media in order that they don't expose our own problems. So we should recognize and appreciate the importance of their independence.
Sipho Pitjana, Wendy Applebaum, Mike Abel, and Stidi Charalambos, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention, and enjoy the rest of today.